Hello, welcome back to my C10 build. Today I'm going to go over one of the things that really does offend me. If you watched my introduction video, I'm making an effort to really clean things up, and one of the things I don't like on this truck is all of this spaghetti wiring. It was all ran external. And I've taken off some of the outer casing already, but just wanted to show you this stuff is really brittle, just kind of falls apart in your hands. And so there's a couple of things going on. One, I don't like the way it looks. Two, if the outer casing is brittle, then I want to be a little cautious about the condition of the wire itself. I pulled some of the wiring out already. It appears to be in good shape. It's nice and flexible, but I want to check the ends. There's nothing worse than spending a long time rebuilding something and then getting down to the end and plugging stuff in, and then it won't start or it won't run or something doesn't work, and you're dealing with fresh paint. And so I want to avoid all of that. But the wiring is all going to get trucked, relocated inside the fender wells or up underneath the firewall here. Let me grab a piece of the trim. There's a groove right up underneath there that I can hide all this wiring up into, and then I will tuck it up into the frame rail where it's out of keep it away from the heat. So the other thing is I have a lot of wires that I'm just not going to use. I'm not going to have side markers on it. There's no horns on it. Maybe that was not a good idea, but somebody had already clipped those off before I got the truck. The other thing was the windshield wipers. Fortunately, where I live, we have pretty good climate. We only get about 11 inches of rain a year. And so I decided to delete the windshield wipers. I'm not going to race in the rain. I'm not going to go to a car show in the rain. So it just doesn't, And the other thing was that this particular body style, there's a kind of a hump in right there for the control arms and stuff to work in, and it didn't let my fiberglass hood set down, so it was up about an inch in this corner, and so this had to be removed so that I can get the hood in there. I am really wanting to clean up this whole firewall. I don't want to cut it out like they do traditionally. I kind of like the body seams. I'm not really going for a full custom look. So I'm just gonna leave what I can. There's a little bit of rust here that needs to be repaired, and this is fairly minor. And I can take care of that while I'm filling that one hole. But I think the rest of it is in pretty good condition, and so I'm going to leave the firewall. This panel here with all the ridges and stuff, I will probably slice down here and just put a clean panel in here to get rid of these bead rolls. If you are doing these firewalls, one of the things, kind of the weak area that I noticed was there's this part here where the fan motor goes. This used to be kind of curled out, and when you grind that off, this is really thin. So I'm gonna have to trim this back a little bit. Also, these pinch welds, let me see if you can see the flex in that. They get really thin when you smooth this down, and so when I weld this, I'll put a piece of reinforcement behind that, a 1-inch strip, and I'll spot weld it to make sure that it's tight before I try to weld that seam up. Moving over to the side, you can see here in this one, it's not even tight. See how I can flex that together. So there's a few things like that that I'm going to improve on. But ultimately, I want to fill in this cowl. If there's no wipers, there's no reason to get in there. There's some discoloration, but there's no rust in there. And so I will seal that and basically plug each of these little holes and make panels for each one of these, so that when this is all done, you know, it'll be smooth, but it won't look like, you know, it's not supposed to be there. So that's kind of the idea. When I'm doing the electrical, again, this can be a real headache. And so there's a few basic tools that you need. You know, a good knife, a marker, some blue tape, some wire ties are helpful. I got my my old man glasses here in case I need to get up close. But the other thing is that old electrical tape is really gummy, and over time, when people are working on their vehicles, they tend to you know, spray paint the firewalls and spray paint the inner fenders, and so you need something to clean the wires with again. And so I have cut off a few wires that I don't need or don't want. I label those, I mark them in case at some point I do want to put it back. I have the ability to. But the wires that I don't want, I've left these out about an inch and a half, and so potentially I could come in and solder, you know, the wire back in there, put some shrink tube over it, heat shrink, so I get a nice watertight joint. The tail lights are good. I already checked the wires all the way back. I'm just going to pull this assembly down the frame. I'll leave the clamps in and put all that back together. This is a little bit of a different story. This, you know, had air conditioning and some other stuff. You can see how bad this stuff is. It's not too hard to figure out what all of this did. And here is your alternator connectors. This is your temp sensor for the water temperature. But then you get into things like this where there's a wire that was just clipped. It obviously went to the motor at some point. I was able to clean it to figure out what color it was, and so I'll trace that back to see what it did and whether or not I need it back. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on how to take this stuff apart. If you look at it, most of it, the clips and stuff, are just a little small screwdriver to pop them off of there. And then, you know, this electrical tape that leaves all the gum on there, get it off and hit it with some brake cleaner and clean it up, and you can work with it. So once I figure out what I don't want, get it removed, get the rest of it cleaned and inspected, then I can pull this entire plug right out of the firewall and set that aside, which is part of my goal. I want to pull the steering, the power brake, booster and stuff, so that I can have open access to that firewall. And so we'll get it all smoothed out, the holes filled, and you know, it'll get painted body color. So this will look really nice when it's all done. So again, on these pinch welds, you know, this will take some of the structure out of it when you grind this off, and they don't always match up. So before I put these panels in here, I want to leave a way for me to put a little 1-inch reinforcement behind there so I can weld this back solid. The other thing that I ran into was I decided that I'm not going to keep the factory dash. I have different gauges that I want to put in. I want to track, you know, my oil pressure and oil temperature, transmission temperature, things like that. And I have different controls for, you know, electronic fans and stuff. So instead of putting in a whole bunch of, you know, aftermarket stuff, I'm probably just going to fill some of these holes so I can have, you know, better switches in there and make it do what I need it to do. So again, I've got a lot of wiring. Excuse me, let me try to zoom in on this a little bit. There's a lot of, you know, it's just not going to let me do it. I am going to do a different video on the interior wiring as I'm taking it apart. But I needed to know, you know, what all of this stuff does. And so I'll show you an easy way to do that. This is the main plug that goes into the dash. And then there's some other stuff in here. I have no idea what that does. You know, and there's wires that kind of just random wires that used to plug into something. They're no longer there, and so, you know, I don't want to leave anything that doesn't have a purpose or potentially could cause a problem, so I'll be taking that out. But I wanted to show you just a quick trick on these circuit board dashes. This is the dash out of this truck. And again, you know, I want a more accurate gauge. Don't need a clock, and I don't need a giant fuel gauge. So I'm gonna, you know, keep the wiring because I don't really need to redo all of that. I'll keep what I can use, but the easiest way to, you know, figure out what everything does on this is you have a circuit panel or a printed panel on these C10s, and it's just strips of copper, you know, laminated in plastic. One thing you want to be sure of is that you don't reverse the dash. You know, it doesn't want to sit this way, you know, so you can see it, and so you don't want to turn it the other way or your stuff will be backwards. And then I just used a voltmeter. You know, I don't know if you can hear the beeper on it, but I just, you know, I use that and, you know, go from each probe and then find out what that does. I know that this one here is the ground for all of the dash lights, and so I was able to put together just a quick schematic of what everything does. I have a choke warning light. I'm not sure why. It's probably, you know, I have no idea. My truck is not four-wheel drive, so I'm pretty sure I don't need that. There's multiple grounds to the fuel gauge, not sure which one I need. And so this is just a way to track it. When I get into the inside of the vehicle, I'll put the colors in here. I'll probably do it in red ink so it stands out. And it'll, you know, it'll be green with white stripe or dark blue or whatever the color is. I'll put that in here so that I have a reference from that. And then when I go into, you know, do my gauges and stuff, I don't have to go looking for something. I know which wire is the fuel gauge, what's my high beam indicator, turn signal indicators. You know, I am taking some stuff out of there, but things like that I think are important. And so I'll be, you know, I'll leave as much of that safety related stuff as possible. The only thing that it really not happy about is the windshield wipers, but because of that, the way that hood come together, it kind of forced my hand on that. I may revisit that, but so that's about it for now, and I'll get into the interior part of it. And then when I get to the new dash, I'll show, you know, kind of how I'm going about fabricating that. I don't want to put the dash pad and the gauge cluster plastic and all that. I want to probably put together something out of you know, aluminum, and then I'll sand that to, you know, to look really nice. So I've got a bunch of aluminum sheeting, and I've got a little cheap brake here, and so I'll break something up and make something in there that looks cool and mount the new gauges in that. So that's it for today. Like I said, wiring it looks like a migraine waiting to happen, but it's really just a matter of, you know, cleaning things, tracing it down, making sure all your connections are good. This is just one of those steps that you don't want to miss. If you're doing a major, you know, overhaul or something on your vehicle, the last thing you want is for, you know, to have wiring issues or shorts or something not work when you get all done. This dash cluster, you can see, looks pretty nice. I had this redone and spent quite a bit of time on it, and put all new lights in it and put it all back in the truck. And these little light sockets are so glitchy. Only half of them worked. I put brand new bulbs in every one of them, and only half of them worked. And you really have to fuss with those things to get them to work. So just a note there, if you're replacing your dash lights or warning lights in your thing, you know, take the time to make sure everything's clean. You know, maybe even take a little piece of sandpaper to the back of the clips and some dielectric grease. But these things are, for whatever reason, they seem to be super finicky. So that's it for today. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.